Milk him. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy like the humid summer air clinging to my skin. My best friend Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide and wild. "You want me to—" "What?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Milk him," she repeated, her voice raspy with urgency. "Please, Anna, you have to. It's the only way." She thrust a glass jar into my hand. It was cold against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. What in God's name was I getting myself into? Confusion warred with concern. Sarah, usually the picture of composure, was falling apart. Her mascara was smudged, her hair a mess of tangled curls. She looked like a woman on the verge. "Sarah," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest, "you need to tell me what's going on." She took a shuddering breath, her gaze darting around the room as if searching for the right words. "It's Mark," she finally choked out. "He's hiding something. I need proof." My stomach twisted into a knot. Mark, her husband of 5 years, the man who seemed to adore her. What could he possibly be hiding that required milking? The pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting. Sarah, usually an open book, spoke in cryptic sentences, her words shrouded in fear and suspicion. She mentioned strange late-night calls, a lingering scent of vanilla and lavender, a sudden change in Mark's behavior. "He's distant," she whispered, her eyes filled with unshed tears, like he's living a double life. I held her hand, offering what little comfort I could. Part of me wanted to dismiss her suspicions, to tell her she was being paranoid, but the look in her eyes, the raw terror that clung to her like a second skin, told me this was no ordinary marital spat. The jar sat on the kitchen counter, a silent sentinel to our bizarre predicament. It was surprisingly heavy, the glass cool and smooth under my touch. I tried to imagine what Sarah expected me to find inside. Evidence of an affair, a secret stash of cash? My mind raced with possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. I glanced at Sarah, who sat huddled on the couch, her eyes fixed on the jar as if it held the answers to all her problems. "What am I looking for, Sarah?" I asked softly. "What will this milking prove?" She looked up at me, her eyes dark and intense. "The truth," she breathed. "It will prove the truth." The next few hours were a blur of awkwardness and growing unease. Sarah, unable to stomach the thought of witnessing the act, locked herself in the bathroom. I was left alone with Mark, a man I barely knew, to carry out this bizarre request. He was surprisingly compliant, his face a mask of confusion and mild amusement. He even offered to help, a suggestion I politely declined. As I performed the task, my stomach churning with a mixture of disgust and morbid curiosity, I noticed something peculiar on his arm, a small red rash, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Section 6, Confrontation and Chaos. The moment Sarah emerged from the bathroom, her face pale and drawn, I knew something was terribly wrong. She took one look at the jar, her eyes widening as she registered the milky white liquid inside, and let out a gasp. "What is that?" she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. It's what you asked for," I stammered, my own voice thick with apprehension. She ignored me, her gaze fixed on Mark, who stood frozen in the doorway, his face ashen. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by Sarah's ragged breaths. Section 7, Unraveling the Lies. The dam broke. Accusations flew like daggers. Sarah, fueled by fear and suspicion, hurled accusations at Mark, her voice trembling with rage. She spoke of betrayal, of secrets, of the strange rash on his arm. Mark, initially defensive, crumbled under the weight of her fury. He confessed, his voice a low murmur, to an allergy, to seeking treatment from a homeopathic practitioner, to the milking being a bizarre remedy. The jar, now a symbol of our collective paranoia, sat untouched on the counter, its contents forgotten. The truth, it seemed, was far more mundane than we could have ever imagined. Section 8, The Ugly Truth. But as the initial shock wore off, a new kind of horror began to dawn. It wasn't the bizarre remedy, the awkward request, or even the temporary breach of trust that chilled me to the bone. It was the realization that suspicion, once planted, can grow into a monstrous, all-consuming beast. Sarah, though initially relieved by Mark's explanation, couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. The seed of doubt sown in her heart had taken root. poisoning her perception of their relationship. The milking, it turned out, was just the tip of the iceberg. The real issue, the silent elephant in the room, was the erosion of trust, the slow poison of unfounded suspicion. Section 9, picking up the pieces. The jar was eventually discarded, its contents poured down the drain, but the damage was done. The image of that milky white liquid, a testament to our collective folly, remained etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust. Sarah and Mark, their relationship strained but not broken, embarked on the long, arduous journey of rebuilding what had been lost. I watched from the sidelines, my heart heavy with a strange mix of sympathy and apprehension. The shocking truth behind the jar wasn't infidelity or betrayal or even a bizarre medical treatment. It was the realization that sometimes the monsters we fear the most are the ones we create ourselves.